Anyway, since we seem to be out of witnesses, I thought I'd drink a little.
They're recording.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Tyler. Hi, Alan.
I'd like to introduce our business partner, Alan Denbach. He's taken to eating my ice cream, which seems to be an ongoing theme in the office.
No, wasn't mine.
So what are we talking about today, Rob?
Well, I thought you wanted to talk about collab maybe a little bit.
All right, I'm glad we got Alan here for that.
Yeah.
I'm all about collab. Very important process.
He looks like he's eating a blizzard.
That's my blizzard.
Mint Oreo Blizzard. Very important.
Okay.
It's an important part of collab. In fact, you don't have these in collab, ain't gonna be successful.
That's an idea. We could bring blizzards into our
Collab is.
our meetings.
Anyways, you guys have fun in your meeting then.
No, sit down, have a drink.
Yeah.
He's just fucking around.
You guys gonna record this shit.
Yeah.
Although if my dad watches this and I just said fucking around, he's not gonna
I know. I got shit for that last week.
Shit might be
Apparently,
okay.
Tyler's father is a stickler for profanity
So I talked to him like 2 days ago.
on the internet.
Yeah, I talked to him 2 days ago, and he says, "So you guys do another one?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Did Rob tone the language down?" I said, "We addressed the issue."
Rob told you could go screw yourself, is what he said, I think, if I remember. Speaking of lawyers and profane, did you hear about Jeffrey Toobin?
I don't know who that is.
Okay, Jeffrey Toobin is a regular contributor on CNN, and I think he also writes for the New Yorker, and he's a lawyer, and he, if I recall, he wrote a book on the O.J. Simpson trial.
Oh yeah.
And I think probably it would be fair to say he's a bit of a sanctimonious asshole, which many of us in the profession are.
What?
So it doesn't necessarily identify him as unique in our realm. But he was on a Zoom call, I guess, this past week. And apparently he didn't realize that he was still on camera. And he started masturbating.
No, that's not right.
Yes, and now he's been let go or suspended from his employment. And I
Because
thought,
of one little mistake.
well, apparently when you've got women on a Zoom call and you start exposing yourself, this is what some people call inappropriate.
You know what? In my kind of realm, if it had been only men on the Zoom call, it would have been inappropriate.
Well, regardless, yeah, I don't want to see that sort of thing.
No, I don't want to see it, but I mean, hey, it's going to happen.
Yeah. So anyway, so Jeffrey Toobin has had his problems, and I found that really amusing. So, we could start the podcast with that little humorous discussion. You will note after 22 YouTube podcasts, neither Tyler and I have exposed ourselves during any moment of these podcasts other than perhaps emotionally.
One day I did leave the second button undone on my shirt.
Well, and I'm wearing like an undershirt under my shirt.
Well, that's because all the Mormon influence you've had in me.
And I respect the delicate sensibilities of Mr. Denbach, who's here now. So anyway, I don't want to take too long today. We tend to be a little prolix on this sometimes. Yeah, right. So Tyler, so why don't you tell us what your thoughts are? You were a newly trained collaborative lawyer last year. Are you doing a ton of collab?
None. Not a single one.
And why do you suspect that is?
All right, well, you might disagree with me, and usually when you disagree, I look foolish. But the reason we're not doing much for collab, I think, is twofold. And the main reason is Lawyers aren't buying into the process, even collaboratively trained lawyers. So they're not strongly recommending it to their clients when appropriate to do so. Instead, they're on their old-fashioned hamster wheels, which is what lawyers do. We want to generate fees. That's our business. Like we went to school. That's why we do what we do. So we get on this old hamster wheel, where we file an application, an affidavit, and the other side responds. We negotiate. Firms go to court, and we do questioning. We go and do all this stuff, and it generates fees. Instead of stepping out of that a little bit and saying, hold on a second, this whole thing that I'm trained to do, it's actually a really good system. Maybe I should be pushing for that. And you know what? I've dealt with some lawyers, much senior to me, here in town lately about this. And I said, what's going on? How come we're not doing this? And they say, oh, the clients don't buy into it. I've been telling them and they don't do it. And I've been saying, look, when I tell clients, I've been doing this for 4 years, just over. When I tell clients, here's the law and here's what we're going to do, they take my advice. And they need to do the same when it comes to process. If my advice is, hey, here's a really good process that's going to be beneficial for you for a number of reasons, they need to take my advice. And that's me as a junior. So when we got senior lawyers saying, oh, I can't get my clients to do it, you call them bullshit. You need to buy into it.
Well, then how is it that you're not doing collab if you insist that your clients all do collab?
Whoa. Well, I'm not saying I insist all of them do. When appropriate, I would certainly push it. Yeah, because I've been on the hamster wheel, and now I need to get off that, and I'm just as guilty as everybody. So here I am. I'm gonna do
Okay,
it.
and I'm not going to completely disagree with you, but I think there are other factors at play. I introduce all of my clients to collab, and I've got no current collab files, and I am a huge proponent. I used to be the president of the Alberta Collab Lawyers. I think clients are more individual rights oriented now than they were 5 or 10 years ago. And I was talking to Stephanie Dobson, you know Stephanie a little bit. And I suggested to her that social media has even a role to play, right?
Oh yeah.
Because the way social media works, if anyone hasn't seen the program, The Social Dilemma, please go see it. It's an eye-opener. But as they say, it trains us to be narcissistic and to live in our own bubble, right? Because when you go into Twitter or Facebook or other social media mechanisms, it feeds you what you want so they can maintain your interest. And it is very bad at giving you things that would challenge your predispositions or your thoughts. So if you start searching about Joe Biden being a bonehead, then you're going to start to get a bunch of pro-Donald Trump stuff, and you'll just keep reading that. And their theory is, you're really going to enjoy this. You'll spend more time, we'll sell more advertising. Conversely, Donald Trump's a psycho. You search that once or twice, and you're going to start getting fed a regular diet on Twitter and on Facebook about how Donald Trump's a psycho. And I think that conditions us to be a little bit narcissistic. I think people, to some degree, are less even-handed in looking at their own culpability, or they're challenging their own predispositions. And you bring that into a divorce that's highly emotionally traumatic. It's hard enough getting people to say, maybe I should compromise. And inherent in collab is compromise. So I think we have more clients coming to us these days that are not really inclined to want to compromise. That's part of it.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you. If you look at the way that society is, even the last 5, 6, 7 years, that there's been this real shift about, rights-oriented.
Oh.
It's created people that are positional, and you see this. You see rioting. You see social media is a great example. People at each other about who's right and who's stupid, which one's an idiot, and so you do see people become very positional. And that's not what collab is about. It's not about hey, I'm right, so I should get X, Y, and Z, or hey, I'm right, so I should get A, B, and C. It's about, okay, well, let's negotiate. Let's give up a little to get a little, but let's focus on what our goals really are and what we really want out of this, and work cooperatively to both get it as best we can. And we call it, oftentimes we'll say it's a more civilized way to get a divorce. And I like to think of it that way. So it's interesting that we see society go in this direction of kind of being positional, being right, and I'm right and you're wrong, and you're racist or you're sexist or whatever. And here we are with this kind of more what we think sophisticated way to resolve disputes, and we're too oppositional and too positional, then we're sort of in our own way about it. So that's another issue. That is a good reason. I mean, that is a big reason for sure.
And somewhere in the middle, I think, and this leans back to what you were saying, I had a bit of an epiphany when I was talking to Stephanie, that maybe the way we try and sell it is not ideal. So Stephanie's got this new website and this program she has called Up a Notch Learning Inc. to give people getting divorced tools to help them do better and help their families do better in the context of divorce. But one of the things she alludes to on her website is the idea of creating a mission statement for yourself in the context of divorce. And what got me thinking was, client comes to you and they're upset and angry and you say, this is what you should do, right? But they already in their own mind have an idea of what they want. And you know how that is. When you tell somebody what they want and it isn't what they want, it's going in one ear and out the other, right? Particularly when they're in this highly agitated state.
Yeah.
And so it struck me that rather than saying, well, this is why collab's a good idea and this is why you should do it, that it might be interesting, and I'm going to start doing this a little bit more, when the clients come in, rather than telling them what they should do, asking them to effectively create their own mission statement. So say to them, what do you want, right? Tell me. And sometimes clients, they're going to be naive or a little bit superficial. Well, I want as much money as I can get for my children. Okay. So you want financial stability. You want a reasonable resolution on and sharing the burden of raising your children financially. So let's explore that a little bit. And then ask them about what they would like for the future. What would you like that relationship to look like between you and your former spouse? What would you like in terms of how you proceed through this minefield? What would you prefer in terms of how we address issues between you and your husband? How much money do you want to spend? We should talk about your budget and what you think legal fees might look like, and how we're going to sort of tackle that. And what you may end up with is the client telling you, you know what, I would really like to do this collaborative divorce thing because it would be really nice if I wasn't at war with my children's other parent for the next decade. And it would be really nice if I didn't have to go into a courtroom and have some lawyer abuse me for several days. And it would be really nice if I could spend less money on legal fees instead of more, right? So I think that kind of aligns somewhere between the position you started with and my response, which is, yeah, maybe we need to approach it differently, but maybe we also have to have our clients take a role in designing the process that might lead them to that. Now, ultimately, if a client says, you know what, I've got boatloads of money and I just want to drag this out for years. Well, you might say, life's too short for me to want to do that myself as a lawyer, but okay, right? Like, I can explain to you why that might not be as fulfilling as you think it is, but they do have their right, right? And one of the things the Law Society, way back when we started doing collab and there were complaints, there was an assertion that a collaborative lawyer who refuses to allow their clients other options for process was effectively in a conflict of interest. Because what you want is at odds with what your client may want. And by you directing them to your process, you're putting your own needs and wants ahead of that of the client. Now, I think that's been watered down, and we've got lots of lawyers, that do nothing but collaborative work that will not go to court. And the clients are just told that at the front end. But I still think there's that element of not being overly paternalistic and allowing the clients to create the course that they want. What do you think of that?
Well, it would be crazy to think, oh yeah, your lawyer has this inherent conflict of interest because they're directing the process. I mean, if I am looking at lining my own pockets or benefiting Tyler at all by directing the clients in a certain process, it's going to be, let's litigate. Sure, let's run some trials. I'll make a ton of money. I'll have some fun. So that's silly. That's a silly thing to think that.
And that was the response, actually. And it's interesting because I was at the nascence of all this when it started in Alberta and really in Canada, and it had been going on particularly in Minnesota for some time where it originated. But there was a ruling, and I think it was the Colorado State Bar, if I remember, and their bar association, is the equivalent of our law society, actually ruled collaborative law was unethical, right? And just for the reasons I've been talking about. And the pushback was that didn't seem to be considered. What about the conflict of interest that lawyers that want to litigate?
Naturally.
Right? How is that not a problem when the lawyer says, and I don't do collab, I'm a litigator. Okay, well, where's the process choice there, Yeah. So I think you're right. And I think the idea of conflict is a red herring. But I do think clients should have the option to create their own course, to set their own sort of road. But I think it's incumbent on us to help them understand the parameters of that road and to more fully consider the nuances of those options, right? And I think we already do that. I think good lawyers do that. The trial process, I'll say to clients, you're looking at 2 or 3 years probably.
Oh yeah.
And costs are difficult to estimate in advance because you don't know how many things are going to be in conflict by the time you get to the end of the day. But it's a safe bet. You're going to spend $30,000 or $40,000 minimum for a trial.
Yeah. Putting aside interim.
So those parameters help the client maybe understand a little bit better that, this is not Judge Judy. This is not, well, let's put you on the stand. We'll put your husband on the stand. And we'll make a decision. It's much more complex than that. And the system, is prone to delay and obfuscate. But I think, it's interesting, the idea of a mission statement. And I don't know if I would call it that, because it seems a little airy-fairy, but something where you sort of ask the client, what do they want? How long do they want this to take?
And something you can look back at and say, okay, when we're making decisions about what we're going to do here, let's look back at that statement and say, how do we get there? What choice to make here to get that? Yeah. I think that could be valuable for sure. Yeah,
I was in a board meeting, an annual meeting a 3 weeks ago in Banff with the CBA Alberta group I'm involved with, and I gave a presentation on initiative screening, like how do you narrow the potential avenues of where you want to go and the things you want to do. And one of the things I came across in some of the material I read was a thing called a culture of swirl. And they talk about organizations and boards in particular that if you're not careful, a bunch of smart people with noble ideas don't narrow things down, and you just end up in a culture of swirl, things going around, and there being no advancing process. And I think that can apply to divorce. I don't know what your experience has been, but I've been on files where things just don't seem to advance, where there are continuous arguments over mundane or minor issues, relatively speaking, and you can't seem to make headway, and the lawyers aren't making headway. And part of that may be exactly what you said, which is saying to your client, how is this getting us closer to where you want to end up, right? You know, I have a problem with, you know, a lot of times personal assets are a big issue, right? You know, I want, you know, the silverware that my grandmother left me and my husband won't let me go get them, or my wife won't let me get my power tools. And off you go on some tangent that takes days or weeks of time. And it might be instructive to look at the client and go, how is this advancing us closer to the end? I understand your concern. I'm not going to dismiss it, but is this helping us? You know, is this a good allocation of what are limited resources?
Right.
The problem is, and I don't know if you've run into this, but there was a time where I was, I guess, what you would call a abnormally aggressive litigator. I like court. I would go to court, and I would be in competition with my fellow lawyers, and I'd be aggressive with judges. And after a while, I realized, in my opinion, that that was not productive necessarily to where my client wanted to get to. And I started doing collab work, and I advised and recommended mediation more often. And even in court, I became a little more conciliatory to try to find reasonable solutions. But I had some perception that the clients liked the asshole Rob litigator more than the conciliatory Rob litigator. And I still struggle with that a little bit, which is I like court, and my clients seem to really like it when they see me in court. And do you ever struggle with that? Do you ever have the sense of, I think my clients really want me to fight, even though I'm not sure that's what they need?
On top of what you've described, I also probably make more money going to court than these other avenues.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's a serious struggle. Clients love to see a fight and you push and say the things that they told you, right? So everyone always says, the judge just heard, they would understand. They would side with me. And you can go out there and you can push and push and push. But then the reality is, when you start to get some experience doing that, you realize court's pretty unpredictable.
Yeah.
Your client's side of the story isn't the only side of the story. And yeah, it's not always in the client's best interest. So I did struggle with that for a while. And I think I still do to some degree, because it's easier. You know what? That's the hamster wheel for me to get on and go and churn out some fees and do what we were trained to do in law school very specifically. But the busier I get, the bigger my clientele list gets, the more I'm okay with kind of saying, you know what, that's probably not going to get you where you want to be. Let's try X, Y, or Z first. That's always an option, but let's try some other avenues. And so I am getting more and more comfortable dealing with these other avenues. And we talked about this on other episodes too, where as a lawyer, you got to be good at both sides of that coin, right? Especially in family law, you got to be able to go into court and fight, but you've also got to be able to be conciliatory and work with other forms of dispute resolution that involve, some collaboration.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think your point about the hamster wheel, I've heard Joe Rogan, big fan of Joe Rogan. He talks about the grooves being deep in certain ways that we approach things. And have you ever cross-country skied?
Yeah.
You know, and if you've skied on a course, you've got these grooves that are very clearly defined. But if you want to go off that trail or past somebody, it takes a heck of a lot more effort, because now you're going to create your own grooves. And I think you're right. I think there is, the litigation grooves are deep.
Yeah.
And they're well traveled. And the grooves that depart from the litigation sphere are a little less clear, and they initially might take a little more effort, because you're charting a slightly less well-known path of approach.
Yeah.
So and who knows? I mean, you're a young lawyer. I'm an old lawyer. There may be a time, as matters progress, where 10 years from now, the grooves of collaborative or mediative or arbitrating, they may become more well-defined so that lawyers are more comfortable in moving from one to the other in a way that they're maybe not right now. Might be. So we're like half an hour in,
All right.
more or less. What are your plans for the weekend?
I think we have some snow to shovel. Or we're going to. Not yet. We don't yet. Snow is coming. So I'm going to be doing that.
I have a 4x4 truck, and my wife's got a 4Runner. So, shoveling, we just drive over it.
Okay, so I did do that one year. I thought, forget it. I'm just going to drive over. I'll just drive over. We get Chinooks at Southern Alberta. It'll melt. And that year, man, there wasn't a single Chinook it seemed. And I got to the point where all of a sudden my truck wouldn't fit in the garage under the opening. And so then I thought, I'll just drive the car. And then eventually the car couldn't make it in and out of the driveway. It was too slick. So then it was really a chore. So no, I've got a snowblower and I'm dedicated. I'm clearing that snow every time.
You have a snowblower? I heard there's a guy that sells reconditioned snowblowers, and I thought he was trying to find me one, but apparently whoever my source was kind of let me down.
This is a shout out to Uncle Martin, who doesn't have a computer, has never been on the internet, and does not watch this show.
Well, I think that was more sort of aimed
I know who you were aiming at.
At the guy with the circles under his eyes. Although they're looking better today.
Yeah, I invested. Here's a shout out to Arbonne. I invested in some Arbonne product. My wife did for me.
The anti-hemorrhoid cream is working well for you.
You see how I'm sitting so steady on my chair? I'm not sure if so much. What's the matter with you?
Marcy's going to Millardville tomorrow, some Christmas affair.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be at home. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll probably watch a lot of college football. I'll see how bad the weather is. There's some things I want to do getting around the house and the yard, but we'll see. Probably do some work. Today was a bit of a write-off. Had a bunch of problems I had to deal with, but so anyway, that's our show for the week, and everyone have a good weekend, and talk to you next week.
Cheers, everybody.